The doorbell rang at exactly 7 in the morning on a Saturday, which should have been my first clue that this weekend was going to be absolute hell. I stumbled to the door in my bathrobe, coffee barely hitting my system, and found Patricia standing there with her clipboard and that smile that never quite reached her eyes. Patricia Montgomery was the president of the Willowbrook Estates, HOA in Scottsdale, Arizona, and she had made it her personal mission to make my life miserable ever since I moved in 6 months ago. "Yates," she chirped, her blonde bob not moving an inch despite the morning breeze. "So glad I caught you before you started your day." I gripped my coffee mug tighter. "Patricia, it's 7 in the morning on a Saturday. Early bird gets the worm." She pushed past me into my foyer without invitation, her heels clicking on the tile. "I have the most wonderful news. The HOA board has decided to host our annual holiday party here in Willowbrook Estates this year, and we need your generator." I blinked, wondering if I had somehow missed several steps in this conversation. "I'm sorry, what?" Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Your generator, dear. That massive industrial one you have in your backyard. We need it for the party on December 15th. The community center's power grid simply cannot handle all the lighting displays and heating elements we have planned, and your generator is perfect." "That generator cost me $15,000, I said slowly. "And it's not for HOA parties. It's backup power for my home office. I run a data management company from here, and I cannot afford to lose power during monsoon season." "Oh, don't be selfish, Yates." Patricia made a note on her clipboard. "It's just for one evening. Besides, Section 12.4 of the HOA bylaws states that homeowners must contribute to community events when reasonable accommodations can be made." I had read those bylaws front to back when I bought the house. That section refers to allowing the HOA to use portions of yards for neighborhood beautification projects. It says nothing about personal property. Patricia's smile tightened. "Well, the board has voted, and we expect full cooperation. The party is on December 15th, so we'll need the generator delivered to the community center by noon that day. We'll return it Sunday evening." "No," I said firmly, her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me," I said. "No, you're not using my generator." Patricia stepped closer, her voice dropping to that sickeningly sweet tone that meant trouble. "Yates Anderson, you are already on thin ice with this board. Your mailbox is 2 inches too tall. Your desert landscaping includes unapproved cacti species, and just last week someone reported that your outdoor lights stayed on past 10:30. You really want to add failure to cooperate with community events to that list?" "My mailbox meets USP's requirements. My landscaping was approved by the architectural committee before installation, and my lights have timers that shut off at exactly 10. "Someone's lying," I said. "And you're not taking my generator." Patricia scribbled something on her clipboard. "We'll see about that. The board meeting is Monday at 7. I suggest you attend." She marched toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and you're getting a citation for answering the door in sleepwear. Section 8.2 requires appropriate attire when receiving HOA representatives." The door slammed behind her before I could respond. I stood there, staring at my closed door, wondering what kind of insanity I had moved into. This was supposed to be a nice, quiet neighborhood where I could run my business in peace. Instead, I had Patricia Montgomery and her band of power-hungry board members trying to micromanage every aspect of my life. My phone rang. It was my business partner, Marcus. "Hey, you still good for the client presentation on the 16th?" he asked. "Yeah, should be." "Why?" "Just confirming. This client is huge, man. If we land this contract, we're looking at expanding the team, maybe getting that office space in Phoenix proper." I thought about the presentation files on my computer, the server equipment in my office, all dependent on reliable power. Marcus, what's our policy on equipment maintenance? What do you mean, the generator? When's it due for service? Let me check. I heard typing. Looks like it's coming up. Manufacturer recommends service every 6 months or 200 hours of operation. You're at about 5.5 months. Can we schedule it for December 15th? Marcus laughed. That's oddly specific. What's going on? I explained the situation with Patricia and the HOA. By the end, Marcus was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. Oh man, that's perfect, he gasped. Yeah, let me call the service company. I'll get them out there that whole weekend. They can do the full maintenance package, takes about 2 to 3 days. Cost you about $800, but it'll be worth it. Do it, I said. Monday evening came, and I walked into the community center for the HOA board meeting. The room was set up with about 50 chairs facing a long table where Patricia sat flanked by 4 other board members. I recognized Deborah from the architectural committee, Tom the treasurer, Sandra the secretary, and Mike the vice president. They all wore matching polo shirts with the Willowbrook Estates logo embroidered on the chest. About 30 residents filled the chairs, most of them looking bored or annoyed. I took a seat in the back. Patricia called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. Welcome, everyone, to the December board meeting. We have an exciting agenda tonight, starting with our holiday party planning. She droned on about decorations, catering, and entertainment for 20 minutes. I checked my email on my phone until I heard my name. Now, regarding equipment for the party, Patricia said, looking directly at me. Yates Anderson has graciously agreed to provide his industrial generator for the evening. I stood up. No, I haven't. The room went silent. Patricia's face flushed pink. Mr. Anderson, we discussed this. You demanded my personal property and I refused. There was no agreement. The bylaws clearly state. The bylaws say nothing about commandeering personal property for parties. I interrupted. I've consulted with a property attorney. Section 12.4 does not give the HOA authority to use homeowner belongings. Patricia looked at the other board members, who suddenly seemed very interested in their papers. The board has voted. Then the board voted on something outside its authority, I said calmly. Additionally, I've scheduled routine maintenance on my generator for December 15th through the 17th. The manufacturer requires it, and the unit will be completely disassembled during that period. So even if I wanted to help, which I don't, it would be impossible. A few residents turned to look at me and I caught some subtle smiles. Patricia's face had gone from pink to red. That's awfully convenient timing, she said icily. It's manufacturer-recommended maintenance. I can provide documentation. I held up my phone. I have the service agreement right here along with the maintenance schedule. Would you like me to forward it to the board? Tom, the treasurer, cleared his throat. Patricia, maybe we should look into renting a generator. I can get quotes. That will cost thousands, Patricia snapped. When we have a perfectly good one right here in the community. That belongs to a homeowner who has the right to refuse, Tom said carefully, and who has a legitimate reason for that refusal. Patricia glared at him, then back at me. Fine, but this isn't over, Mr. Anderson. We'll be reviewing your property for compliance issues. You do that, I said, sitting back down. I'm up to date on every single bylaw. The meeting continued, but Patricia kept shooting daggers at me with her eyes. When it finally ended, several residents approached me in the parking lot. Good for you, standing up to her, said an older man I recognized from 3 houses down. Patricia's been running this place like a dictatorship. Last year she tried to fine me for having the wrong shade of beige on my house trim. A woman with gray hair nodded. She made us remove our vegetable garden because it wasn't aesthetically consistent with the neighborhood vision. We'd had that garden for 10 years. I filed away these stories, sensing I wasn't alone in my frustration with Patricia's leadership. Has anyone ever challenged the board? They exchanged glances. A couple tried, the older man said. Patricia hit them with so many fines and violations they eventually moved. She's relentless. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Patricia's threat to review my property. I had been meticulous about following every rule, but I had learned quickly that Patricia didn't need actual violations to make life difficult. She could interpret rules creatively or simply invent new ones. I spent Tuesday morning triple-checking everything. My mailbox was exactly 42 inches high, precisely within the 40 to 45-inch range specified in the bylaws. My house was painted desert sand, an approved color. My landscaping included only native species approved by the architectural committee, with documentation to prove it. Even my trash cans were stored in an approved side yard enclosure. Wednesday afternoon, I found the first citation stuck to my door. It claimed my generator was an unapproved structure that required architectural committee approval. There was a fine attached, $500. I photographed the citation and immediately pulled out my records. When I had installed the generator, I had submitted detailed plans to the architectural committee. Deborah herself had approved it in writing, noting that it met all setback requirements and was appropriately screened by desert landscaping. I scanned the approval letter and emailed it to the HOA board with a polite note stating that the generator was fully approved and the fine was therefore invalid. I also included a reminder that Arizona Revised Statutes Section 33, 1809, required HOAs to provide notice and opportunity to cure before issuing fines. Thursday brought another citation. This one claimed my front yard rock landscaping was improperly maintained and had excessive weed growth. The attached photo showed a single dried tumbleweed that had blown into my yard, probably that morning. Fine, $250. I went outside, removed the tumbleweed, took photos of my immaculate yard, and sent another email to the board. I was starting to see Patricia's strategy. She was going to bury me in citations and fines until I either gave in or moved. Friday morning, I called my property attorney, Robert Chen. I had consulted with him before buying the house, and he was familiar with HOA law. "Yates, this is harassment," Robert said after I explained the situation. "Patricia's clearly retaliating against you for refusing to provide your generator. Do you have documentation of everything?" Every citation, every email, every photo, plus the original demand for my generator. Good. Send it all to me. I'm going to draft a letter to the board explaining that their actions constitute improper retaliation and harassment under Arizona law. If they continue, we can pursue legal action. How much is this going to cost me? For the letter, $300. If it goes further, we'll talk. But honestly, most HOAs back down once they get a letter from an attorney. They know they're on shaky legal ground. I sent him everything and felt slightly better. At least I was fighting back with proper legal channels. Saturday morning arrived, and with it came the generator maintenance crew. 2 technicians from Mesa Power Systems showed up at 8 o'clock sharp in a white van loaded with tools and equipment. "Mr. Anderson, we're here for the scheduled maintenance on your generator," the lead technician said. His name tag read Carlos. "Perfect timing," I said, and I meant it. "Come on around back." I led them to my backyard, where the generator sat on its concrete pad, surrounded by decorative rocks and desert plants. It was a beauty, a 50-kilowatt Generac unit that could power my entire house and office for days. "Nice setup," Carlos said appreciatively. "You don't see many residential installs this size. This for a business, home office. I can't afford downtime." "Makes sense." "Okay, we're going to start with a full diagnostic, then drain and replace all fluids, check the electrical connections, test the transfer switch, and run a full load test. Should take us through Sunday, maybe into Monday morning." "Take your time," I said. "Do it right." As they started working, I went inside and settled into my office. I had work to do anyway. The client presentation was coming together nicely, and Marcus had lined up 3 more potential contracts for January. Around 10 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I looked at the security camera feed on my computer and groaned. Patricia was back, and she had brought reinforcements. Deborah from the architectural committee stood beside her, along with a man I didn't recognize. I answered the door. "Patricia." "Mr. Anderson, we need to discuss your unauthorized generator maintenance," she said crisply. "Unauthorized?" "It's my property on my property, being serviced by a licensed company. Section 15.6 requires homeowners to notify the HOA of any maintenance activities that may create noise, odors, or visual disruption to the community." I had to give her credit. She was creative. The maintenance crew arrived at 8 o'clock on a Saturday. That's well within the allowed construction and maintenance hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekends, and I'm not required to give advance notice for routine maintenance. The man beside her stepped forward. "Mr. Anderson, I'm Craig Foster, the HOA's attorney. Perhaps we can discuss this reasonably." An attorney. She had actually brought an attorney to my house on a Saturday morning. "I'm happy to be reasonable," I said. "But I'm not lending my generator to the HOA, and I'm not canceling legitimate maintenance because it's inconvenient for your party." Craig pulled out a folder. "The board is prepared to offer compensation. $2,000 for use of the generator for the holiday party." "No, $5,000. "It's not about money," I said. "It's about the principle. You don't get to demand my property just because you want it. And frankly, after the harassment I've experienced this week, I wouldn't help this board if you offered me 10 times that amount." Patricia's eyes flashed. "Harassment?" "We've simply been enforcing the bylaws. You've issued multiple baseless fines in retaliation for my refusal to comply with an improper demand," I said. "My attorney has documentation of everything, and he's preparing a formal complaint." Craig glanced at Patricia, and I saw something flicker across his face. Concern, maybe. "Mr. Anderson, perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. I'm sure we can work this out amicably." "I'm sure we can," I agreed. "Stop issuing false citations, withdraw all pending fines, and leave me alone. Then we'll be amicable." Patricia opened her mouth, but Craig put a hand on her arm. "Let's regroup," he said quietly. They left, Patricia's heels clicking angrily down my walkway. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. This was escalating faster than I had expected. I called Robert immediately. "They brought an attorney to my house," I said. "Good," Robert replied. "That means they're worried. HOA attorneys usually advise boards to back down from weak legal positions." The fact that he showed up means he's probably trying to convince Patricia to let this go before it becomes a real problem for them. "She offered me $5,000 for the generator. Did you take it?" "Hell no," Robert laughed. "Good man, stick to your guns." "I'll have that letter ready Monday morning. We'll send it certified mail to the entire board." The rest of Saturday passed quietly. Carlos and his partner worked steadily on the generator, occasionally asking me questions about its operation. By evening, they had the unit completely disassembled, parts laid out on tarps, fluids drained into proper containers. "She's in good shape overall," Carlos reported. "But you've got some wear on the alternator brushes we should replace, and one of the fuel injectors is getting fouled. Good thing we're doing this now. Another month or two and you might have had a failure when you actually needed it. How long to put it back together? Tomorrow we'll do the repairs and reassembly. Monday morning we'll run the load tests. Should be done by noon, maybe earlier. Perfect." The HOA party was Saturday evening. My generator would be in pieces. Sunday morning brought the biggest surprise yet. I was in my kitchen making breakfast when I heard shouting from my backyard. I ran to the window and saw Patricia standing at my back gate, yelling at Carlos. I rushed outside. "What's going on? This maintenance is fake," Patricia shouted. "You're just doing this to sabotage our party." Carlos looked bewildered. "Lady, I don't know anything about a party. This is legitimate scheduled maintenance. See," he held up his work order. "The alternator brushes are worn past spec and we found a fouled injector. This generator needs this work." "I want to see your business license," Patricia demanded. "Patricia, get off my property," I said firmly. "Now." The gate was open. "You're trespassing. Leave immediately or I'm calling the police." She sputtered, her face purple with rage. "This isn't over. You keep saying that," I said. "But it is over. You're not getting my generator. Accept it and move on." She stormed off and Carlos looked at me apologetically. "Sorry, man. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Not your fault. The HOA president is having a meltdown because she can't have her way." He shook his head. "I've seen some crazy HOAs in my time, but this is something else." After Carlos and his partner left for the day, I reviewed my security camera footage. I had cameras covering all sides of my property, and they had captured everything. Patricia entering my backyard, shouting at the maintenance crew, even her trying to look at the disassembled generator parts like she could somehow prove they didn't need maintenance. I backed up all the footage to cloud storage and sent a copy to Robert with a note about the trespassing incident. His response came within an hour. "This keeps getting better. She's building our case for us. Document everything." Monday morning, the maintenance crew arrived early to finish up. I went to work in my office, preparing for the big client presentation on Saturday. Everything was riding on this. If we landed this contract, my company would finally be financially stable enough to expand. Around 9, my doorbell rang again. Security camera showed 2 police officers. My stomach dropped. What had Patricia done now? I opened the door. "Officers, Mr. Anderson. I'm Officer Rodriguez. This is Officer Chen. We received a complaint about an illegal business operation at this residence." I closed my eyes and counted to 3. "Let me guess." Patricia Montgomery filed the complaint. Officer Rodriguez checked his notes. "The complaint came from the Willowbrook Estates, HOA, yes. They claim you're running an unlicensed generator repair business from your home in violation of neighborhood zoning." I almost laughed. "Officers, would you like to come in? I can explain everything and show you documentation." They followed me inside. I pulled up my business license on my computer. "I run a data management consulting firm. I'm fully licensed. The generator is personal property for backup power. I'm not repairing it myself. I hired Mesa Power Systems, a licensed contractor. They're doing routine manufacturer-recommended maintenance." Officer Chen looked over the documentation. "Can we see the generator and speak with the contractors?" "Absolutely." I led them to the backyard, where Carlos and his partner were reassembling the unit. Carlos showed them his contractor's license, the work order, and explained the maintenance being performed. The officers took notes, asked a few questions, and seemed satisfied. "Mr. Anderson, there's clearly no illegal business operation here," Officer Rodriguez said. For what it's worth, this sounds like a personal dispute with your HOA. It is, I confirmed. The HOA president wanted to borrow my generator for a party. I refused. She's been harassing me ever since. Officer Chen nodded sympathetically. We get calls like this sometimes. HOA disputes. Not really a police matter unless someone's breaking the law. After they left, I was angrier than I had been yet. Patricia had actually called the police on me. This had crossed a line from petty harassment into something more serious. I called Robert again. She filed a false police report. What? I explained the situation. Robert was quiet for a moment. Yates, that's actually a crime, filing a false police report. If the officers determined there was no basis for the complaint, and if she knew it was false when she filed it, that's a Class 1 misdemeanor in Arizona. What do I do? First, get a copy of the police report. You can request it from the department. Second, I'm escalating that letter I was drafting. This has gone beyond simple HOA overreach. She's now actively interfering with your peaceful enjoyment of your property and potentially committing criminal acts. We need to put the entire board on notice that this stops now. By Monday afternoon, Carlos had the generator reassembled and was running final tests. Everything checked out perfectly. The unit would be fully operational by Tuesday morning, well after the HOA party. That evening, I attended another emergency HOA board meeting. Patricia had called it, and the agenda listed only one item: discussion of Mr. Anderson's continued violations and refusal to cooperate with the board. The community center was packed. Word had spread about the generator controversy, and it seemed like half the neighborhood wanted to watch the showdown. Patricia called the meeting to order and immediately launched into a tirade. Mr. Anderson has consistently refused to be a good neighbor and community member. He has violated numerous bylaws, disrespected the board's authority, and now he has engaged in fake maintenance activities to avoid contributing to our holiday celebration. I stood up. I'd like to respond to these accusations. You'll have a chance to speak when I'm finished, Patricia snapped. Actually, under Robert's Rules of Order, which the bylaws state govern these meetings, I have the right to respond to accusations, I said calmly. And I have documentation that refutes every single claim you've made. Tom, the treasurer, cleared his throat. Let him speak, Patricia. She looked like she wanted to argue, but several other residents were nodding. Fine. Make it quick. I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the community center's projector. First, the violations. Every citation I've received has been without merit. I displayed the architectural approval for my generator, the photos proving my yard was maintained, and the timestamps showing my lights turned off by 10 p.m. every night. Second, the police report filed this morning claiming I was running an illegal business. Officers Rodriguez and Chen determined this was completely false. I have a copy of their report right here. I displayed it on the screen. Third, the generator maintenance. Mesa Power Systems is a licensed contractor performing manufacturer-recommended service. The generator had worn parts that needed replacement. This is documented. I showed Carlos's detailed maintenance report, complete with photos of the worn alternator brushes and fouled injector. Finally, harassment and trespassing. I played the security camera footage of Patricia entering my backyard without permission on Sunday morning. The room was dead silent. Several board members were staring at Patricia with expressions ranging from shock to anger. Mrs. Montgomery, said a voice from the audience. It was Craig Foster, the HOA attorney. Could we take a brief recess? I need to speak with the board privately. Patricia looked like she wanted to refuse, but Deborah was already standing. Motion to recess for 15 minutes. Second, Tom said immediately. the board filed into a back room. I stayed in my seat, trying not to show how nervous I was. Several residents came up to thank me for standing up to Patricia. One woman said she had been keeping a list of Patricia's violations of proper meeting procedures for months. When the board returned, Patricia looked like she had been crying. Her makeup was smudged, and her hands shook as she sat down. Craig Foster stepped to the microphone instead. "Ladies and gentlemen, after consulting with the board, I'm advising that all pending citations and fines against Mr. Anderson be withdrawn. The board acknowledges that Mr. Anderson has not violated any bylaws and that the generator maintenance was legitimate. The board apologizes for any inconvenience." Patricia's mouth was a thin, tight line. She was staring at the table. "Furthermore," Craig continued, "the board will be renting a generator for the holiday party from a commercial vendor. And finally, the board will be reviewing its procedures for issuing citations to ensure they're fair and properly documented going forward." I nodded. "Thank you. I accept the board's apology." As the meeting adjourned, I saw Craig pull Patricia aside. They had a heated, whispered conversation, and I caught the words lawsuit and personal liability. Patricia's face went from red to pale. I drove home feeling like I had won something important, but I also knew Patricia well enough by now to know she wouldn't let this go easily. People like her never did. The week passed quietly. Tuesday through Friday, I focused on work, preparing for Saturday's client presentation. The generator was running perfectly, all maintenance complete. I tested it twice just to be sure. On Thursday, I received a formal letter from the HOA board withdrawing all fines and citations. It was signed by all 5 board members, including a very tight, angry signature from Patricia Montgomery. Friday afternoon, Marcus called. "You ready for tomorrow?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Presentation is solid. Demo environment is set up. Generators maintained and ready if we need it, which we shouldn't. "You're overthinking it, man. We've got this." Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, typical December weather in Scottsdale. I was up early, going through the presentation one final time. The client was scheduled to arrive at 10 o'clock for a 3-hour presentation and demo at my home office. At 9:30, my power went out. I stared at my suddenly dark computer screen in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not today. I checked my breaker box, but everything was fine on my end. I called the power company and got an automated message saying there was an unplanned outage in my area. Estimated restoration time unknown. Perfect. Just perfect. Then my generator kicked in automatically, just like it was designed to do. The transfer switch engaged, and within 30 seconds, my office was back online. My computers rebooted, the air conditioning hummed back to life, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Thank God I hadn't let the HOA take this thing. The client presentation went flawlessly. The CEO of Titanium Data Solutions, a major Phoenix-based company, spent 3 hours at my office with her technical team. They were impressed by my setup, my professionalism, and most importantly, by the presentation itself. "Mr. Anderson," she said as they were leaving, "we've seen 5 companies pitch for this contract. Yours is by far the most comprehensive. Expect to hear from us early next week." Marcus and I high-fived after they left. "Dude, we crushed it," he said. "That's a 2-year contract worth $500,000. "Don't jinx it," I said, but I was grinning. The power came back on around 4 p.m. I switched back to utility power and shut down the generator. Whatever had caused the outage, I was glad I had been prepared. That evening, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. As I passed the community center, I could hear music and voices. The HOA holiday party was in full swing. They had indeed rented a generator. I could see it behind the building, much smaller than mine, but apparently adequate. I was about to head home when I heard a familiar voice raised in anger. "Patricia, this is unacceptable. I ordered the deluxe lighting package and this is clearly standard." I couldn't resist. I walked around to where I could see the party setup. Patricia was shouting at a tired-looking event coordinator while partygoers looked on in embarrassment. The decorations were lovely, the lighting was nice, and everything looked perfectly fine to me. But apparently not to Patricia. "Madam, this is exactly what was ordered," the coordinator said patiently. "If you'd like to upgrade, we can discuss that, but there will be an additional charge. I already paid $12,000 for this party, $12,000. For a neighborhood holiday party." I shook my head and walked away. How much of that was HOA dues paid by residents like me? I made a mental note to look into the HOA budget and financial reports. Homeowners had a right to review those. Sunday morning, I was enjoying a lazy breakfast when my doorbell rang. I checked the camera and was surprised to see Deborah from the architectural committee. She was alone. "Deborah," I said, opening the door. "What can I do for you?" She looked uncomfortable. "Yates, can I talk to you?" "Off the record." "Sure, come in." We sat in my living room and she twisted her hands nervously. "I need to apologize. I signed off on those citations Patricia gave you, even though I knew they weren't legitimate. She pressured the whole board, said we needed to present a united front." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm done. I'm resigning from the board. This isn't what I signed up for. I wanted to help make the neighborhood nice, not harass people who won't bow down to Patricia's demands." She looked at me directly. "She's been skimming money from the HOA budget." I sat up straighter. "What? The holiday party didn't cost $12,000, it cost $6,000. I've seen the invoices. Patricia has been inflating costs and pocketing the difference, and it's not just the party. She's been doing it for 2 years, maybe longer. Why haven't you reported this?" "I just figured it out. Tom, the treasurer, started asking questions last week after you showed up with all your documentation. He went through the books carefully and the numbers don't add up. He's planning to bring it to the board this week." "Does Patricia know?" "Not yet, but she will soon." Deborah stood up. "I wanted to warn you. When cornered, Patricia gets vicious. She's going to lash out and you're her primary target right now." After she left, I sat there processing this information. HOA embezzlement was serious. If Patricia had been stealing money, that was actual fraud. That was criminal. I called Robert immediately and explained what Deborah had told me. "If this is true, the homeowners need to know," he said. "And depending on how much money we're talking about, this could be felony theft. The board needs to involve law enforcement." What should I do? Nothing right now. Let the board handle it internally first. If they don't take appropriate action, then we'll discuss options. But document this conversation with Deborah, just in case. Monday morning, I got an email from Tom, the HOA treasurer, requesting an emergency board meeting for Monday evening. The agenda item was listed as financial audit findings and discussion. This was it. This was when everything would come out. I debated whether to attend. I wasn't required to, and part of me wanted to stay far away from the impending explosion. But another part of me wanted to see Patricia finally face consequences for her actions. In the end, curiosity won. I showed up at the community center at 7 p.m. and found it packed. Word had clearly spread that something big was happening. The room buzzed with speculation. The board filed in, Patricia walking stiffly to her seat, her face a mask. Tom carried a thick folder. Craig Foster, the HOA attorney, was there too, looking grim. Patricia called the meeting to order. "We have a special presentation from our treasurer tonight regarding the annual financial review." Tom stood up. and I could see his hands shaking slightly. Members of Willowbrook Estates, I've been reviewing our financial records in detail over the past week, and I've discovered significant discrepancies. He put up a spreadsheet on the projector. Over the past 2 years, there have been consistent gaps between reported expenses and actual vendor invoices. For example, the holiday party this year was reported as costing $12,000. The actual invoices total $5,800. Gasps went through the room. Patricia sat frozen. Tom continued, his voice growing stronger. I've found similar discrepancies with landscaping services, maintenance contracts, and community improvements. The total amount of unexplained expenses over 2 years is approximately $47,000. The room erupted. People were shouting questions. Patricia was staring straight ahead, not looking at anyone. Tom raised his hand for quiet. I've contacted our insurance carrier as required by our fiduciary duty. They've recommended we immediately suspend Mrs. Montgomery's access to HOA funds and conduct a formal forensic audit. They've also recommended we contact law enforcement. This is ridiculous, Patricia finally spoke, her voice shaking. There are reasonable explanations for all of this. Invoices get misplaced. There are additional costs that don't always show up in vendor bills. Patricia, I spoke to the vendors directly, Tom interrupted. The numbers I have are confirmed by them. There are no missing invoices. The money is simply gone. Craig Foster stood up. Mrs. Montgomery, I strongly advise you not to say anything further without consulting a personal attorney. This board meeting is not the appropriate venue for this discussion. Patricia turned on him. You're supposed to be defending me. I represent the HOA, not you personally, Craig said firmly. And my advice to the board is to suspend you immediately, conduct the audit, and report the findings to the Scottsdale Police Department. Patricia's face crumpled. She started crying big, ugly sobs. I needed that money. My husband lost his job. We have medical bills. I was going to pay it back. The room went completely silent. She had just admitted it. Mike, the vice president, spoke up. Patricia Montgomery, I move that you be immediately suspended from the board pending investigation. Second, said Sandra, the secretary. All in favor, Tom called. 4 hands went up. Patricia kept her hand down, still crying. The motion carries. Patricia, you are suspended from the board effective immediately. Please surrender any HOA property in your possession, including keys, documents, and financial records. Patricia stumbled out of the room, still sobbing. Several people moved aside to let her pass, looking at her with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. After she left, the meeting continued. Tom laid out the plan for the forensic audit and explained that the HOA insurance might cover some of the losses. Craig confirmed that he would be filing a report with the police on behalf of the board. I sat there, stunned. I had known Patricia was vindictive and power-hungry, but I hadn't expected this. Embezzlement. $47,000. That was serious prison time. As the meeting adjourned, several residents came up to thank me. If you hadn't pushed back on the generator thing, Tom never would have looked at the books closely, one man said. You exposed all of this. I hadn't meant to. I had just wanted to keep my property and be left alone. But I guess sometimes standing up to bullies has unexpected consequences. Over the next few days, the story unfolded rapidly. The forensic audit confirmed Tom's findings. Patricia had been systematically inflating expense reports and pocketing the difference for 2 years. The total amount was actually higher than $47,000. It was closer to $62,000 once all the discrepancies were uncovered. On Thursday, 2 detectives from the Scottsdale Police Department interviewed me about my interactions with Patricia. I provided them with all my documentation, the timeline of citations and harassment, and the security footage of her trespassing. Mr. Anderson, it appears Mrs. Montgomery targeted you specifically because you were asking questions and standing up for your rights, Detective Williams said. Embezzlers often react aggressively when they feel threatened. Your refusal to comply with her demands made you a threat to her cover-up. I just wanted to keep my generator, I said. Well, your stubbornness uncovered a significant fraud. The county attorney's office will be filing charges next week. On Friday, I got the call I had been waiting for. The CEO of Titanium Data Solutions offered us the contract. 2 years, $500,000 with options to extend. Marcus and I celebrated with expensive steaks and cheap beer, laughing about how the worst week of my life had somehow turned into the best week of my business. The following Tuesday, Patricia Montgomery was arrested at her home. The charges were extensive: theft, fraud, and misuse of entrusted property. The county attorney's office announced she had stolen over $62,000 from the HOA. The local news picked up the story. HOA president arrested for embezzlement was the headline. They interviewed residents, including me, although I kept my comments brief and factual. I didn't need to pile on. The facts spoke for themselves. Over the next few weeks, the HOA began to heal. Tom was elected interim president, and they immediately started reforming the rules and procedures. The first thing they did was repeal several of Patricia's more ridiculous bylaws, including the one about outdoor lights being off by 10:30 and the restrictions on approved plant species. Tom called me personally to apologize. Yates, I should have pushed back on Patricia months ago. I knew she was overstepping, but I convinced myself it wasn't worth the conflict. I'm sorry you had to be the one to stand up to her. It worked out, I said. How's the restitution looking? Insurance will cover about $40,000. We'll probably recover another 10 to 15 through the criminal case. The rest might be a loss, but we're working with the county attorney to get as much back as possible. What about Patricia? Her attorney is trying to work out a plea deal. The county attorney wants her to plead guilty to felony theft, do some jail time, and pay full restitution. If she doesn't take it, they'll go to trial. Good, I said. I felt a little guilty about how satisfying it was to hear that, but only a little. Patricia had made my life miserable for weeks. She had harassed me, filed false police reports, and stolen from every homeowner in the neighborhood. She deserved whatever consequences came her way. In February, 3 months after the generator incident, Patricia pleaded guilty to felony theft and fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, with credit for time served, and ordered to pay full restitution of $62,000. Her husband had to sell their house in Willowbrook Estates to begin making payments. I attended the sentencing hearing. I wanted to see it through to the end. Patricia, wearing an orange jumpsuit, looked small and defeated. She apologized to the judge, to the HOA, to the residents she had stolen from. She cried and talked about her medical bills and financial stress. The judge was unmoved. Mrs. Montgomery, you held a position of trust. Homeowners relied on you to manage their money responsibly. Instead, you abused that trust for personal gain. You compounded that crime by harassing residents who questioned your authority. This court cannot excuse such behavior. As they led her away, she looked at me. Our eyes met for just a second. I didn't feel triumph or satisfaction. I just felt tired. Outside the courthouse, Tom met me. Thank you for being here. I needed to see it finished, I said. The board wants you to know that we've implemented new financial controls. 2 signatures required on all checks. quarterly audits by an outside firm, and full transparency with monthly financial reports posted online for all residents. That's good. That's how it should have been all along. We'd like you to consider joining the board, Tom said. We need people who aren't afraid to ask hard questions. I thought about it. A month ago, I would have refused immediately, but maybe I had learned something from all this. Sometimes you can't just opt out of community. Sometimes you have to engage, even when it's difficult, even when it's uncomfortable. Let me think about it, I said. I drove home to my house in Willowbrook Estates, where my generator sat humming quietly in the backyard on its regular weekly test cycle. It had never been needed for the holiday party, but it had been there when I needed it, reliable and powerful, exactly as I had designed. That, I realized, was the whole point. Having the resources and tools you need when you need them, on your own terms. Not borrowing them, not lending them out to be used by others, but maintaining them properly so they're ready when your moment comes. My moment had come on that Saturday when the power went out during the biggest presentation of my career. If I had given in to Patricia, if I had let her take my generator for her party, it would have been in pieces or poorly maintained or simply unavailable when I needed it most. Standing up for myself, refusing to back down, documenting everything and fighting through the proper channels, all of that had been worth it. Not just because it exposed Patricia's crimes, though that mattered, but because it taught me that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing to do. The HOA election was scheduled for April. I ended up running for a board position, and I won easily. Apparently, standing up to corrupt leadership makes you popular with voters. My first motion as a board member was to revise the bylaws to include stronger protections for homeowner property rights. No more vague language about contributing to community events. No more architectural committee decisions made by one person. Everything transparent, everything documented, everything fair. Marcus thought it was hilarious that I had gone from fighting the HOA to joining the HOA. Character development, he called it. Maybe he was right. I had learned that systems and organizations are only as good as the people who run them. Patricia had turned our HOA into her personal fiefdom, but it didn't have to be that way. With the right leadership and the right rules, an HOA could actually serve its community instead of terrorizing it. 6 months after the generator incident, Willowbrook Estates was a different place. The new board was functional and reasonable. We focused on actual community improvements, like fixing the playground and organizing neighborhood events that people actually wanted to attend. We cut the budget by 30% by eliminating wasteful spending and negotiating better vendor contracts. And we never, ever asked to borrow anyone's personal property for HOA events. I kept my generator maintained on schedule, and it sat in my backyard, ready and waiting. I tested it monthly, checked the fluids, and made sure it would start when needed. It had become more than just backup power to me. It was a symbol of self-reliance, of standing up for what's right, of refusing to be bullied. Sometimes Marcus would come over for barbecue, and we'd sit in my backyard, drinking beer and watching the sunset over the Arizona desert. Inevitably, his eyes would drift to the generator. "You know, you could have just given them the generator for one night," he'd say with a grin. "Would have been so much easier." Yeah, I'd agree. But then I wouldn't have this great story. And it was a great story. The time an HOA president demanded my generator for a holiday party, so I scheduled maintenance that exact weekend. The time standing my ground exposed massive fraud and sent a corrupt leader to prison. The time one man's stubbornness changed an entire community for the better. I tell that story at neighborhood barbecues and board meetings, and people would laugh and shake their heads. Some of the longer-term residents would add their own stories of Patricia's reign of terror, tales of violated bylaws and petty tyrannies that seemed absurd in retrospect. But we all knew it hadn't been absurd at the time. It had been frightening and frustrating and infuriating. It had taken real courage to stand up to someone who wielded power unfairly, and it had taken persistence to see it through to the end. One evening in late summer, I was working in my office when the power flickered. Storm clouds were building over the mountains, the first monsoon of the season. I saved my work and waited. Sure enough, the power went out completely about 10 minutes later. My generator kicked in smoothly, and I kept working without interruption. Outside, lightning flashed and thunder rolled, but inside I had light and power and the quiet satisfaction of being prepared. That was the real lesson of the whole generator saga. Not that HOAs are corrupt, though some are. Not that you should always fight authority, though sometimes you should. The real lesson was simpler. Take care of your own house first. Build your own resources, maintain your own systems, stand on your own ground. When you do that, when you're secure in yourself and your principles, you can weather any storm. You can stand up to bullies and survive scrutiny and come out the other side stronger. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you can make things better for everyone around you in the process. The generator hummed in the darkness, steady and reliable, powering my home through the storm. I smiled and went back to work, grateful for the machine that had started all this, and grateful for everything that had come after. Patricia Montgomery was somewhere in a prison cell, probably regretting her choices. The HOA she had terrorized was thriving without her. And I was sitting in my home office, running my successful business, surrounded by the tools and resources I had worked hard to acquire and maintain. In the end, that's what it was all about. Not the generator itself, but what it represented. The right to your own property, the right to say no, the right to stand firm when pressured, and the right to demand accountability from those in power. Those rights matter. They're worth fighting for. And sometimes defending them leads to outcomes you never could have predicted. I heard my doorbell ring and checked the security camera. Tom was standing there with a covered dish, looking wet from the rain. "Power's out at my place," he called when I opened the door. "Thought I'd bring over some food before it goes bad. You got room in your fridge?" I laughed and waved him in. "Come on in. Generator's running. Want to stay for dinner? Thought you'd never ask." We ate together in my kitchen, two neighbors who had become friends through adversity. We talked about board business and work and plans for the fall community festival. Normal stuff. Good stuff. Later, after Tom left, I stood in my backyard and looked at the generator. It sat there in the darkness, lit by a single security light, humming its steady rhythm. A simple machine doing its job, keeping the power flowing, holding back the darkness. "Thank you," I said quietly to the generator, feeling only slightly ridiculous. It didn't answer, of course. It just kept running, reliable and strong, exactly as designed. And really, what more could anyone ask? The storms passed, as they always do. The power company restored service the next morning. I switched back to grid power and shut down the generator, grateful once again that I had it, grateful that I had maintained it properly, grateful that I had refused to let anyone take it from me. That was almost a year ago now. Patricia finished her sentence and moved away. I heard she went to live with family in Nevada. The HOA continued to function well under new leadership. My business grew and prospered. Life went on, but I never forgot the lessons of that December. Stand your ground. Document everything. Don't back down from bullies. Maintain your resources. And sometimes, scheduling maintenance at exactly the right moment is the best revenge of all. My generator sits in my backyard still, maintained and ready. I hope I never need it in an emergency. But if I do, it'll be there, humming to life, providing power when everything else fails, just like it always has, just like I always knew it would.